Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with entertainment journalist and personality Janeé Bolden, discussing juggling her career as the managing editor at Gossip, growing up in Iowa in a predominantly white space, and empowering women with her brand, Curl Mob. You're now tuned into the IdOMUSIC podcast, and I'm your host, Sammy. I'm sitting down with the managing editor for Gossip, Janeé Bolden.
Hi.
Just tried so hard not to say the number of names that we just said weren't your names.
All the wrong names.
So how you feeling?
I feel pretty good today. It's Wednesday, hump day.
It is.
Got to get over that hump.
Midweek.
Payday's 2 days away.
Amen. God is good. So I want to first just ask you, how'd you get this start here? We know, people, I guess, know now that you are the managing editor for Gossip. They know that mostly from what you've done, but you've done a number of things, or you've written for a number of publications. You've interviewed so many artists over the years, to celebrities. And you pretty much forged a name in entertainment since the beginning of your career. But how did you land in this entertainment and digital media space as an entertainment journalist?
Well, it was really not planned. I always knew I wanted to write. I was always really passionate about that. Like, I loved to read as a little kid. And I used to like to write poetry. Of course, I went through my phase where I was like, I want to be a rapper. I want to be a spoken word artist.
What?
Like in high school. Yeah, it was like, it's all bad. I have all types of middle class raps, like suburban raps, like.
I think we have pretty similar backgrounds, which is I find it to be very interesting. It feels like I'm like talking to myself. How does it feel to be on the other side of the mic, though?
It's difficult. I feel so uncomfortable. Like, it took me a long time anyway, even to get comfortable in front of camera, because a lot of times when I interview artists, I want them to be on camera and me to be off camera.
Right.
So it's just been like a growing process. It took a long time for me to get comfortable, and then I was definitely encouraged by friends of mine who were like, you do so much and you deserve for people to know who you are and what you're doing. And one day I woke up and I was like, yeah, I'm all right with that. People can know who I am.
Right. I mean, it's totally, it's interesting that you said that you had a background in just like writing poetry growing up, trying to write your own raps. You consider yourself like a hip hop buff.
Definitely. Well, I moved to Iowa City, Iowa when I was 12.
Yeah, tell us about that. Why were you in Iowa?
So my stepfather, well, he legally adopted me. So my father, he's a dentist, and he's a pretty good one. And he was actually recruited by the University of Iowa to run their dental department.
Oh, that's what's up.
And previously he had been teaching like at Tufts and Harvard and all these places, but they were not like tenure track jobs. So it was like a great opportunity. He got sold on the fact that the schools are great in Iowa. I don't know if people know, but the ITBS, like the testing is all created there.
Iowa, yeah.
So like, and really my high school that I went to, which is West High School, is the best. It's been ranked like the best public high school like in the country, like repeatedly. So they were like, yeah, we're going to move to Iowa and get her a great education. And I got out there and I thought it would be fine. I was living in Boston before that, and I was one of the only Black kids in Boston at my school. And I was like, oh, white people are white people, like it'll be fine. I'll figure it out. No.
White people are not white people.
Sorry. Just like Black people, white people are extremely diverse characters, and they come with all different kinds of challenges and questions. And you have your ignorant folks, and you have people who are just naturally curious, and they just want to know, can they touch your hair? And, why does Michael Jackson, moonwalk? They ask you every question about any Black person they've ever had. They want to know, do you tan? What are you mixed with? If you tell them you're not mixed, they're confused because like light-skinned people isn't like on their register. It's like Black people look one way. And so it was definitely tough, but I was fortunate because of the timing where hip hop was becoming like such a major part of culture. So at the time that I moved there, it was 1990, and I was just, I was in middle school, so I was just getting into like TLC and like, it was before Outkast, but like obviously that was coming, and you had A Tribe Called Quest and the Native Tongues. And I have like older cousins, male cousins who were like super into it. They had already got me on. The funny thing is like the first song that I ever knew was a Beastie Boys song. So it's
really?
like, yeah, it's ironic. So like the first rap that I knew was by a white rapper. So I mean, that's interesting to me. But then I got into other stuff and I was like heavy into NWA, into the West Coast stuff, like, but literally any kind of rap music that would come out, I would listen to. And the crazy thing out there is BET would go off at like 8 or 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Like just the channel would just shut off and you would have like infomercials from like 8 o'clock on. So literally from the time I would get home from school until it went off, I was like watching every single music video. I knew all the music videos. I was listening to like...
You knew all the moves.
I knew all the moves. I somehow got myself into student government at one point, and we would have like the planning committees for dance, and I always was like, you got to put these songs on the playlist. Mm-hmm. And like, that's how we had any like Belle Biv DeVoe on the playlist. Cause I was like making sure, you know, I'm not going to listen to Metallica all night. We're going to listen to some rap music too.
For sure. How has your love for hip hop translated into your career though? Because like you said, you didn't imagine landing into like what you're doing now necessarily. You just wanted to be a writer. But how is that like all of your passions kind of coming into form with your career today?
I think it's like been a gradual thing. So like the way that I got into writing as an entertainment journalist was through hip hop. I started really small, working for a friend's website called Dope Mag, and I interviewed like Rhymefest and Diggable Planets and Little Brother, like kind of more, you know, I guess people would call it backpack rap or whatever. But just getting those credits brought the attention to some other folks who were editors. So actually someone I went to NYU for college, and someone who I went to NYU with was working for SOHH, which was like direct competitors with all hip hop, like around that 2004, early aughts. And he was like, we need a news writer. Are you interested? And that's really how it worked out. It just happened to be, you know, something I cared about, something I could do. I'm pretty like much a nerd overall. Like I like reading, you know.
Yeah.
Black people actually do read.
People do read. We do read. And I mean, I think as a writer, somebody who's in your field, it's important that you do read.
Yeah. So that helped with like the research part of it. So it was like if I knew I was going to interview somebody, I would like read up a whole bunch on them, maybe try to ask them something they hadn't been asked before, that kind of thing.
Definitely. You went to NYU, you mentioned that, but I wanted to go back a little bit because you're originally from Alabama and then you moved a bit.
I moved a lot. Like I'm basically like a gypsy child. Yes.
So like talk about, you know, or why were you moving so much? It will be the question. And then also how did that impact like the way you talk to people, the way that you're able to interact, make friends or network even?
Well, so I moved a lot really because of my parents being academics. So they were kind of going from different colleges. But also I think some of it was just, so both my mother and my father, my biological father, are from Birmingham, Alabama. I only lived there for the first 15 months of my life. They got divorced when I was a baby, and my mom decided to pursue her PhD at Boston University. So that's how we moved to Boston. And then from there, it just was a series of moves based on their career decisions and like all that type of stuff. Yeah. Stuff totally out of my control. And I think I'm actually naturally kind of a shy person. But when you like to, you know, when you end up moving a lot, like you're either going to be miserable and alone or you're going to have to be open to making friends. So I also just kind of like learn how to open up. And I think, you know, I also had like a lot of interesting things about me. Like I always have been really like a lover of culture. Like I love dance, I love film, art, all that type of stuff. So when you're in those type of communities, like it's a lot easier to, you know, build a community because you have other people who are like-minded and have similar interests. So I think that's always how I would try to navigate, was like the other people who like, you know, to sing. And like when I lived in Boston, I was part of like a traveling community theater, I guess it was.
Oh, yeah.
So we would like act. We do plays.
That's cool. That's cool to know.
We would do plays and like movies like Stand By Me and stuff like that. We would like have the whole soundtrack down and
That's
like,
dope.
yeah, super into, like, that was really what got me through all the moves, was just like always kind of being involved in the arts.
Gotcha. So I want to ask you, you mentioned NYU, studying there. Why NYU? One, obviously, it's a great school for what you were interested in pursuing, but you study English and African American studies.
Yeah.
So what type of experiences did you have just being in New York, being an aspiring writer, and then, going through an NYU's program?
Well, I mean, New York was really instrumental for me, especially coming from Iowa. Like, I definitely had a hard time in Iowa, felt really alienated, isolated, depressed, suicidal, like all of those things. Just when you really feel like a one in like a black dot on a white piece of paper, like it can do a number on your ego and your self-esteem. So going to New York, where everyone is like free to kind of be who they are, is like a huge deal. And I was pretty heavily recruited. Like I said, I am a huge nerd. Like, I was probably never got like a C in my life.
Wow.
My parents are crazy. So like, I would
mean,
be the
parent. Your parents both being
they're they're nerds. Yeah. So
well.
My mom has a PhD. My dad is a dentist. It was like my parents are the Cosbys, and
you gonna make it happen.
Not now Cosbys, but at that time it was like the Cosby Show.
Right.
But yeah, obviously no Cosby. They were like the Huxtables.
Yeah, the Huxtables. Let's be clear.
Separate that. So I had scored really highly on the PSAT, and they have something, I don't know if it's still called National Achievement Scholarship, but it's like for Negro students. Like, they still had the word Negro or colored, and it was like something really antiquated in the title.
I think they may have changed
it
that.
recently.
Yeah, recently.
Okay, so I had a lot of scholarship offers because of that, and I had great offers. Like, I could have went to Howard. I could have gone.
Where I went, girl.
Oh man, so I wanted to go to Howard. I actually had planned to go to NYU. I had got into a bunch of Ivies, and like I got into Brown.
Oh wow.
I got into Amherst, Wesleyan, Bryn Mawr, like some really great schools. But NYU gave me the best financial aid package. Gotcha. And then when the test result thing went through and I was confirmed as a National Achievement Scholar, I got even more offers. So that's when Howard was like, here, full ride. And I was like, perfect. To my parents, like, hey, change of plans. Like, let's go to Howard.
Right.
And my dad was like, nah, son, not going there. It was at the time when it was like rough in that area. So that's how NYU by default, basically, but it was perfect. From when I visited, it felt great. I'm really into shopping, and it's like right in the West Village. Like, I was walking around Soho when I went to go visit the school. I was just like, yeah, this is where it's at. This is where it's at, definitely. And it was a great experience. Part of the NYU experience is the real life experience. So going to the museums, I took a field study in art history, and I was at the Met like every Friday. The nightlife, obviously, like I got into
something to do
quick. I was like at the clubs, New Music Cafe. You would see people out all the time you would see rappers. I remember seeing Grand Poobah at parties. I remember seeing Outkast the first time they were in New York at Tramps.
Dope.
So that was part of my experience.
What was that
too.
Experience like? That show in particular?
It was dope. It was amazing. And I mean, I saw a lot of people early. How
were they received, I guess, would be my question. Because, I mean, they're like these weird Atlanta, like that. I'm from here, so that was like my first taste of hip hop. I think, not my first taste, but that was like what I really drew to being from here. But I know they were received differently elsewhere.
I think I didn't really pay attention because I was so hyped, but I don't think everybody else was as hype about it. Gotcha. But I think part of the great part for me was just seeing the support, because you did see a lot of artists who were there to support them.
That's dope.
So that was like, amazing. And I still have like old ticket stubs and like, New York was amazing. Like, I definitely, I think for an 18-year-old, especially someone who's not like totally green, like, I don't think you can go there and just like not have any street smarts about yourself.
Very true.
But if you, if you're like the town weirdo or whatever, like, go to New York.
You won't feel like an outcast.
And you won't feel like an outcast. Like you literally, I was embraced. Like I would walk down the street and people would be like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I love your hair." And I used to wear my hair in little Lady of Rage Afro puffs when I was in college, or like I would do the little buns on my head, and that's where I really got into wearing my hair natural. It was like
and embracing yourself.
And that's even with the Africana Studies. Like, so they're one of the schools that have an Africana Studies program. It was a strong one, and really me minoring in Africana Studies, that was just because I kept taking those classes. So they were like, you know, if you take 4 classes that you have the minor complete. And I was like, well, okay.
Cool. Great.
Yeah.
Glad we got that out of the way.
Yeah.
I was going to ask though, because you did minor in African American studies, why you didn't choose an HBCU, or like going to, having that experience coming from Iowa to a Howard or a Spelman or whatever. But you did still find, gain some knowledge that way.
Well, so what happened actually was NYU has an exchange program with several HBCUs, Spelman being one of them. And when I started, I actually did plan to do an exchange at Spelman. Gotcha. However, I have a ton of family here. So I was spending every summer and holiday in Atlanta in Stone Mountain with my aunt and uncle. So I was like, I don't need to go to Spelman.
I already got that experience.
I got that experience. And not only that, but at NYU, I think the funny thing about my life has been like, it's been such sharp contrast. So I went from like, growing up in Iowa, surrounded by mostly white people. I would say most of my closest friends were mixed or Asian because maybe because me coming from Boston, how I spoke or whatever, I wasn't totally accepted by Black people either. It was like kind of being in the middle. I definitely have an experience that is very close to my friends who are biracial, like where they're like, well, Black
not
people
accepted on this end. And
yeah,
I feel you.
But I was though, like, because at some point I had to make a decision. I think we all experienced that in high school, where you're like, are you going to sit at the Black table, or are you going to go sit over there with Becky?
Right.
And if you like have any type of like this about you, I got the Black fist up, then you sitting at the Black table.
Yeah.
And so that's what I came from in that environment. And then going to NYU, I still was super involved in like, they had a program called AAP, which was like Academic Achievement Program, specifically for their Black and Latino students to make sure that we did well in school. They matched us with tutors. And so that meant I had a support group of that at NYU, and they had other social groups that I was involved in. And that, we have these debates at work all the time because about half of my staff, I have 2 Hamptonites on my staff. I have a Howard, I have a Howard grad, and I have 2 Clark, alum. 2 Clark alum as well. So we get into that type of debate. Now there's also, on the other edge, there's me, NYU, and then I have another editor who went to Emory, and Davidson is where David Dennis went. So we're all kind of like have different perspectives on that. And listen, don't think I wasn't at your HBCU, because come homecoming time, I made my way to Howard, I made my way to Hampton, and I made my way to FAMU. Yeah. I went to all of those. I used to go to all the home, because once I graduated high school, my mom actually ended up teaching at FAMU. Oh. So I went down there for their homecoming.
Absolutely. You have to.
Listen, I used to pick up boyfriends at these HBCUs. I had a Hampton boyfriend.
I'm weak.
Yes.
You was out here just making moves.
I was out here.
That's super important, though.
I was like, I might not go there, but man does.
There's some connection. There's some connection. And we all know that HBCU homecomings are lit.
They are. Like, once I saw that, sorry. I know you went to Howard.
Uh-oh.
But them Rattlers, that homecoming, and
there's no beef there, so that's fine. We love.
They're marching. What is it? The drum majors. Oh, listen. No one else can compare to those drum majors.
That's true. I was in the band, so like marching, and so that was like you either go to Southern, you go to FAM, you go to these like big band schools.
Big band schools.
So when I went to Howard, I went to band camp for one day, and I was like, you know what? It's just not the same. It's not the Southern experience. So definitely, you put an HBCU in the South, and it's lit. But so tell us, before we get too deep into that talk, about your role at Bossip. We know, or actually even before that, working with like smaller publications. Why was like working for a smaller publication important for like how you've pretty much been a senior role at any other place that you've been to?
Dang, I'm like, you stumped me. I never really thought about them being smaller publications. It's funny because most of them have been Black owned. So true. I think that's been really interesting, an interesting experience, especially with my background.
And maybe they weren't
just
smaller
Black
publications, but at the time were like public, these like blog sites and these websites were like,
yeah, I got in early on it, definitely. So it's like when the digital shift was starting to happen, like I always was an avid magazine collector. So when I lived in Iowa, like I'm not even gonna, like I told you, I was like depressed and stuff. Vibe used to get me by. The Source used to get me by. I used to buy all those Source mixtapes, XXL, all of those magazines I would collect. I probably still have a million of them. And like one day I was like, I got to cut these down. And I started ripping just so I would have the covers. And like would throw the rest of the magazine away. I was like, I just don't have the storage space for this. Yeah. Like my shoes need this closet space. But yeah, so Dope Mag led to SOHH, which led to XXL, which led to The Source, which led to Vibe.
For these publications that you once just read.
It felt crazy. And like
to see your name, like your byline.
It definitely felt crazy to see my byline. But I think I'm also definitely a person who, my parents it was like nothing was ever good enough. Like they are perfectionists. So like literally I would be writing for these magazines and they were like no big deal. Like they were not impressed by that. Mm-hmm. My mom is like, you have this master's degree, because I actually have an MFA as well from NYU. Uh-huh. My mom would be like, you have an MFA and you're writing for hip hop magazines? Like go get your PhD and get a real job. Like that's how she is. That's
their era, their generation. They believe in like, be a dentist, be the doctor.
Yeah.
Find some stability there.
And even with that, even with my own, the way that I evaluate myself and my progress, I was never a cover story writer. So I would almost like kind of like diminish my achievements. I think that's only recently where you really have to learn to like start patting yourself on the back more and be like, I wrote the first Nicki Minaj feature magazine feature for a national publication when she was in XXL. It was 2007, I think, or 2008. And at that time, I knew that Nicki Minaj was going to be a huge star. I remember my editor, he had your last name, Anselm Samuel. Mm-hmm. He's now goes by Samuel Rock, but he told me, he was like, you might want to like keep in touch with her. I really think, she might be like, and I think, I don't want to misquote him, but I believe he said the next Lil' Kim. So at that time, and that's the other thing. Like I never was like really trying to attach myself. And it was funny because I would look at my male colleagues and they would be like, become best friends with these artists they would interview. They would be at their shows. They would really build their relationships. And it took me a long time to get more comfortable to where I could do that. Yeah, just as a woman. And I think that's how I started getting into the women's platform, where I was like...
Which I can't wait to talk to you about. But let me ask you about getting the story. Because, I'm a journalist. I went to school for something similar, radio, TV, and film. But, like, I think that's what a lot of... Now in journalism, it's different. Like we've kind of lost print journalism and moving towards digital.
It's like the Wild West, and people. It's like if you want to interview with someone, it's like literally anyone can get an interview. Like people will just hit people on Twitter or DM them or whatever. And I get it. It's like by any means necessary, whatever. But it's definitely like not what it used to be.
What were the types of strides that you had to take to get the story?
Well, a lot of it was like staying really cool with people. Like I would say my relationship with Sycamore helped me a lot because he actually introduced me to Nicki.
Sure.
And that we both went to Anselm to pitch the story. And I think that helps sometimes, where you have the writer who actually wants to write the story.
And then
and you have the A&R who is like, yeah, we need this feature, we need this look, and this is the person who should tell the story. And I think that it wasn't just him. There was a bunch of different people. DJ Wally Sparks, who also lives in Atlanta now, he was one of my first quote unquote industry friends. Like, I don't consider myself to be like a industry person or even to have industry friends. I have friends and I have acquaintances or peers. It's like you have to like
separate
know the
two.
difference.
Yep, yeah.
And for me, Wally really helped mentor me. He knew a lot of people from working in the business. I don't want to say industry anymore. I'm like the label business, and I had a column for SOHH called Player Watch. And that introduced me to a lot of people behind the scenes.
What was that? It
was like where you would profile people. But we didn't have podcasts back then. So it was like, these people are doing, that's how I met Angela Yee. I was profiling her for Player Watch. She was, she had just become Cypher Sounds co-host on Shade 45, Cypher Sounds in the Morning. And she had just launched Lip Service. So they wanted, a write-up on her. And I believe her publicist had reached out to SOHH. That's how I met her. I interviewed Mick, who's like a huge Mick Boogie, but he goes by just Mick now. He's like a huge DJ. And then in turn, those people would usually introduce you to someone else. There was like Johnny Shipes I interviewed before.
Just the people that you might not know, but they're doing something
behind the scenes. I remember I was supposed to do one on BB Guns at one point. It didn't happen, but like, she's always someone who's been on my radar because of Player Watch.
Right.
Who else? I mean, literally all the behind the scenes people, a lot of A&Rs, DJ Drama was featured there. Trying to think of some of the bigger names. Memphis. Yeah, I mean,
the list goes on.
It was a great, like, I still have the files on my computer. So like,
you're a collector. It seems like
I am.
Have, like, a number.
I archive stuff.
How do you keep up with this stuff?
I don't I don't keep up with it. I'd be like, oh, I totally forgot about that. What was that?
So let me ask you about in the early days of like print journalism, or like when you were first starting off, how was it like getting paid? Were you freelancing? Were you...
Girl.
You have a master's from NYU. You have a whole degree.
And this is exactly what I mean about what my mom being like, what are you doing?
Exactly. And I understand that, and even early on in what I've been doing, a lot of times you just take the gig, or you just take the opportunity. What was that for you?
And that's why people say, like, just have faith because God will provide. But
for sure.
For me, I definitely leaned heavily. Like, there were times where I was living with my mom. When I lived in New York, I worked for NYU full time. So, and I actually did really well. So I was like doing great in New York, but I just had that itch. Like, I wanted to write full time. And my mother encouraged me. I think honestly, she was really worried because 9/11 had happened.
Oh, yeah.
So she was like, get out of New York, come south. She was living in Pensacola at the time.
Oh, Lord.
I know. Awful. So no disrespect to the folks out in Pensacola. Shout out to Pensacola.
It's different. It's not New York.
No, it's definitely not New York. But I started dating a guy that lived in Atlanta, so I would be back and forth all the time. And the pay was, the first job after I left New York was with SOHH. And initially my first pay, my salary was $500 when I started, $500 a month to write 2 news stories a day. And then when they added Player Watch, they were like, here's an extra $200.
Thank you so much.
$200 a month. And I was like, well, I live with my mom, like, low overhead. I didn't have a car. I didn't really have any bills outside of my credit card debt and my phone bill or whatever.
Shopping habits. Huh?
Exactly. And so I was between her and my boyfriend, and he was supportive. Shout out to AceBack. And he ended up moving to LA. So that's actually how I got the Source stuff. And I'm not going to lie to you, the Source never paid me. Ever.
Damn.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Well,
but double XL checks were good. They were great. They used to pay $1 a word.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
So once I started getting those relationships with the editors.
And then building that credit and credibility.
So it was like I was kind of stacking the checks on top of each other because I could write for SOHH and Double XL at the same time. I could freelance. I would make money writing bios for people, but it was a hustle. Like I literally was working all of these relationships, trying to, put my two pennies together just to like make it through. And I was fortunate that I had a support system. So like that's definitely key. Like everybody has to have that. And then Askia, when I moved to Atlanta, it was 2008, and one of the first people that I met was Askia Fountain, and he hired me to like do some bios, and I think I was working on somebody's website at that time.
So you make websites as well?
No, like I was writing like blog posts for websites. I don't know if it was B. Cox's website. It was one of the songwriter producers that Askia had connected me with, and Askia talked to me like serious. He was like, what do you want to do? And how much do you have to make in order to make this make sense? And we talked about that. And I remember writing down a number, and like a couple months later, a friend of mine was like, hey, I know someone that works at Bossip and they're looking for a managing editor. And I applied, not really being too like geeked about it. Cause I was like, it's not a hip hop publication. Cause I had interviewed for a job at Hip Hop DX, and I think Kathy Ayandoli ended up getting it, which is great. She's another woman and doing her thing. So that was awesome. But for me, I was like in Atlanta, like trying to like scratch by on these freelance jobs, and really finally realized, okay, I need to get a full-time job. And I applied for the Bossip job and hit it off right away with their CEO. And something about it told me like, I can work with this woman. And it wasn't even so much about what it being gossip or anything. It was just kind of like, it's writing.
Right.
It's a job. You can use your relationships. Angela Yee had also encouraged me. She was like, at that time, she wasn't really doing the rumor report like she does for The Breakfast Club now, but she was like, we can use some of the stuff that I get on my show. She was very encouraging as well. And I was like, okay, so I'll give the gossip thing a try. And it just worked out. Like, it's been fun. It's come with challenges too, because people definitely like treat you different when you come in the room if they think you're gonna like possibly put them in a negative light.
Which is what I wanted to ask with Bossip. I love how you first off you all have used your platform to start building with WeTV, and we'll talk about that, how that opportunity came about. But how do you feel about like the way media portrays celebrities and artists' stories? Because you come from a space of like, I write, like I truly write stories. And if you look at your background and all of the other credits that you have like these compelling stories about people that we may not have known about. So it's not that you're not a writer or you're not a journalist, but with these type of platforms, that's what people assume.
So people can definitely look and make assumptions that...
Right. And especially with like big artists being more open about like their personal bouts with fame, be it depression, anxiety, all these things. And then you bring in like this like TMZ or whatever these platforms are, which we see as news.
Yeah. It's the culture. Like, let's be honest.
The culture
This
itself.
isn't just a Bossip thing. Like, you look at CNN and they'll spend all day talking about Kardashians, So, like, that just goes to show you our society is totally, like, consumed with reality stars, with, like, sex, plastic surgery, all of these things that are not necessarily, like, artistry related at all. And I think it's a tough situation, but I think that if you look at what today's landscape looks like and who the people who at the very top are and how they operate, like you can't ask Donald Glover a question about his baby mama. Like that's not happening. I think when the artist sets those boundaries and they are doing other things that people want to talk about, people will talk about those other things. I think that a lot of people, the reason why it's become such a big thing is because there are people who want other people to look at them. They're like, look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm screwing this man or this woman.
The attention.
Look at my butt, look at my boobs, look at my plastic surgery, my fake whatever, my big car, oops, I leaked some nudes. Like, that's,
oops.
Like it's very strategic. Right. So I think it's like definitely one of those things where you have people who want to point the finger of blame in one particular direction. Like, the media has definitely been a scapegoat for a lot of people, but then you're like, why are we the scapegoat? Like Bow Wow, for example, you know, like, well, he'll be like, oh, the media always tries to fry me and this is why I'm suicidal. But like, dude, you went on Instagram and you posted XYZ. You don't want us to talk about it now? And I think that's really the answer. Is like, if you don't want people to talk about your personal life, don't put your personal life out there.
That's true. So tell us about how this opportunity with WeTV came about, because I was super impressed. I'm like, oh, wow, they have like this whole show, like, you know, just based upon this platform and the people who are behind the platform that have these like vibrant personalities. How'd that opportunity come about, and why was that important for you to, or for you all to transition into like this TV space?
I think really what it was is just that, so Bossip had, the part of the Bossip voice is that we always say we. It's never like a I thing. Gotcha. So some of that I think initially was in kind of like cloaking the identities of the writers, because when you're talking about sensitive subjects, like you don't want to become like the guy who gets punched at the festival for like saying something, you know?
Right.
But I think another part of it was just kind of wanting to represent as a group.
Gotcha.
So there's like a lot of, I think, beauty in the fact that we are a group of diverse individuals who like collectively take our voices, put them together, and make something really special. And we kind of like can help each other. So it's like someone might not be as strong in one area, or someone may be writing about something and then someone else might have a relationship where they can like add something to the story. So I think that was the idea behind it, was kind of showing how we kind of build off of each other and play off each other. And I think the headlines at the point when the show had first started were just beginning to like get a lot of attention for having like the craziest headlines. The show really came.
Yeah, y'all do have some pretty wild headlines.
They're crazy. They're definitely crazy. And I think a lot of it's just like, we're just silly as hell. And like, we like taking like silly words and like also words that are popular in pop culture, and just talking about like social issues. And I mean, life is interesting. So it's like being able to tell a story in a colorful way, like, is the best way to do it.
Definitely.
And I think that's why we was attracted to us. And then in terms of us working with them, so Mar Frazier, she is the
vice president.
Yeah, vice president over actually all of the digital brands for Interactive One. Bossip was acquired by Interactive One last year. Yep. So she had previously had all kinds of meetings. You know, when you work in the digital space, you're selling your ad space to make the blog profitable, basically. So I think she had certain relationships from those type of meetings, and I think she pitched the show, got the interest of the network. We got a production company that was a good fit, and that's kind of how it worked. And in terms of the rest of us, I think none of us had really experienced that production life before.
Right.
And it had a lot of challenges. We didn't have wardrobe, makeup, hair budget. So that was like stressful, because like, you're going on TV.
And I think, trying to look the part.
Yeah. And they were like trying to drag us at first. Like, oh, everybody's fat and ugly.
No
and
way.
Like, yeah, they were like say stuff. And then like, it was just like,
put yourself out there. That's like already difficult enough. And then to be the person that's talking about what's going on, and now they're talking about you. How does that feel?
I mean, I think it just comes with the territory, because I feel like people are going to like kind of step on whatever, but I also feel like your energy has a lot to do with it. And I think I've been on the website, like my pictures or video footage that I've done, because I end up in a lot of sponsored video that we do. And I'm always like, don't look at the comments. And Beyonce has even said that before, like, you don't look at the comments. However, there have been times where like I was like scared to look at the comments, and then I actually looked at the comments, and they're like all nice comments.
Positive
and
things,
I think that even that happened with the show, where it was like, you might get one or two people saying something crazy, and then you go to their page and they have 4 followers, and like their avatar is a bot.
Yeah, a little
and you're like, wait, do you care what that person? Do you really care? So I think that all played into it. And for me, the bigger thing was it gave me a huge appreciation for television production. And I also got a big family out of it that I didn't expect. Of course, I expected to get close to my castmates and my staff members who I already have relationships with. Yeah. But I did not expect to like love my associate producers and love, the camera equipment and the audio person, and like literally have relationships to this day where like there's a producer who we text all the time. There's people like, let's go have lunch. Like these relationships that you get where you basically end up with a whole extra family.
Gotcha.
And I understand now why actors like love acting. And it's not even so much about creating characters. Like so much of it too is like you get like these great experiences with people. And I think that's the thing about working in this business. And I'm sure you've experienced that in IdOMUSIC, that like creative people are really special. And like there's good and bad people in any field. But like the people who are so good and that they can understand like, like I think all of us who have any type of artist within us, you feel so different all the time. So like when
being
you
around like-minded people.
Oh my God. And that feeling is like, it's like being in love or something, it's like the serotonin that you get from like,
from just that experience. Totally. I agree.
You got to get high. You got to get high off life, like where you can, like get those highs, because turn on the TV and there's another school shooting. Like
exactly, it's a lot going on. So
it's a lot going on.
To have that outlet and that experience is definitely good, and to love what you do is awesome.
Oh yeah,
it's awesome. So I saw you lead a discussion at A3C last year with some pretty awesome women, like Angela Yee, your friend, and Karen Civil, and there were a number of other women that
Jenny Drake was on that panel. Fadia Cater, Nicole Planton was as well. She's an A&R.
Very poppin' women. I must add. We're doing
it again.
We just saw that.
The announcement just came out today.
So congrats on the Women in Charge panel with A3C. Where are women in the center of entertainment and hip hop today? I feel like even, just in respect to any industry, you're seeing a lot of women. We just won the Democratic vote for Georgia.
Right, Stacey Abrams.
So you have your Angela Rye. So like, not even just in entertainment and hip hop, but specifically that. Since
we're in the time of women. Like women are powerful, and we've been powerful. We've been doing stuff for hundreds of years, but it's always been a fight. It's always been a fight for women to be recognized on the same level as men. And I think that it's just really magical time that especially because there's always been these like sayings and stuff, women don't get along. They're catty. They're, we're known for being like the B word and like, and it's just like, I don't know that experience. Like, I'm definitely a woman. When you hear women like, well, I'm really more of a guy's girl. Like, I just don't have any girlfriends. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? I'm definitely both. Like, don't get me wrong. I always been one of the guys, and I've also always had girlfriends. Yeah. So I just think it's amazing that women are working together towards a common good. And we don't have to be one thing. You can support Amber Rose, and you can also support Michelle Obama, or as my friend Mara Chan says, she said Coretta and Cardi B. She's the T-shirt with a little Coretta, a little Cardi B, and that's definitely, that's the great thing about being a woman. It's not a one-dimensional thing.
For sure. How are you influencing that progression for women? I mean, you're doing these, you're getting into like public speaking over these last few years. You've been able to lead discussions with panels like the Women in Charge panels. But what would you say your place is in that space to influence the movement? Essentially,
I just want to help as many people as I can and encourage people, because I know how it felt for me, and I always felt really honored. Whoever I got to interview, like I always knew that it was a privilege. Sure. Like I had a job that was a privilege as opposed to like scrubbing toilets or something like that. Like I was really blessed to make pay my rent from talking to rappers.
Right.
But and now, really, that was another accident almost, because A3C wanted to work with Bossip, and I was working on it with a couple people from my staff, and I was just like, listen, I'm passionate about being a woman in this business, and I remember being the early stages of my career and having a lot of male colleagues, because I'm very close to a lot of men in the business, but what comes to mind is Trent Clark, who is over at Hip Hop DX. And he had forged some relationships with some artists, and he was always going to shows and being backstage. And I was just always afraid because it was like,
what was that fear?
The fear was just that they wanted me just for sex, you know. It was just, and I think like even just sometimes when I think the assumption, and I'm sure like you being in a studio, people do it all the time where they're like, they just figure you're screwing somebody who's there. Or, you know, and that was part of it. It was like, I never wanted people to look at me like, who is she screwing? I never wanted people to think, oh, she's a groupie, you know.
You wanted to be, you know, you just wanted to
I wanted to do my job. I just want to do my job.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was simpler to just do my job, go home, and not necessarily like have that. Yeah, but then I also felt like I was hurting myself in the process because people get scoops and stuff because they have those relationships. True. I think the thing that I wanted to be was the woman that other women could see. Oh, women are here. It's okay for me to. It's okay for me to be in the room.
Thanks. Yeah, for sure. What other roles or opportunities do you feel like women there are for women in the entertainment space? Like, what are some of the things you're?
Oh man, I mean, I don't think that there's any limit to it. I think I know female engineers, you know, female producers. You know, things that people think of as traditionally male jobs. I know some great female managers, booking agents, like, you know, things that are put together. Heather Lowry at Live Nation, like she does amazing work. Kristen Frazier at Beats. I mean, so many women who are doing great
amazing things.
Yeah, no, I'm just very inspired overall from myself. Karen Civil, she's, you know, not only a friend, big supporter, you know, always like she's told me time and time again, like anything I can do, I'm there, you know, and I think that really has encouraged me to kind of go further with the steps that I have been taking. And I think the other thing is just like, we have been told time and time again, oh, you want to work in hip hop or something. Well, why don't you be a publicist? And I'm sure like, regardless of what your job is, at some point someone has said, hey, you're a publicist, right? Like, because that happens to me almost daily. Like people still think I'm a publicist.
Yeah, I don't know what.
And not that there's any, I think a publicist is an incredible job. Like shout out to all the great publicists.
Are great people for that job. I feel like, you know, just the skills and the natural traits that we have, I guess, you know, we can use to our advantage in that specific role, but that's just not the only
it's not the only job. And I just feel that was really, even with the A3C, was like, I had seen a panel that they had and it was multiple publicists on the panel, and I was just like, nah, let's try to. I was like, let's get Deb Antony, Hannah Kang, you know, let's get Shanti Das, let's get the Brat, let's have women, see women in all their different roles, and like let these girls know, like, you don't have to only be a publicist or what other assistant, like, because that's how they act like you can only be an assistant or a publicist. But I know Latoya Lee's at A&R. I know Nicole Planton. You got Key, who's a great manager. Key Henderson. I mean,
so many women. Yeah.
And I mean, I absolutely love it. Like, I feel like we are the shit.
Let's do this. So let me ask you, because you've been able to interview and talk to some really cool people over the years. From, you know, you spoke a little bit about how you broke the story with Nicki Minaj, because she was the early days of Nicki Minaj. But who was like one of your favorite people to talk to or interview with? I'm sure there may be a few great conversations, but something you can just imagine, like, I remember that time. That was a good time.
Well, I did a phoner with Janet Jackson once, and that was huge. She had just like the sweetest voice, and it was like, they didn't really tell us what she wanted to talk about. It literally was like a conference call, and I happened to ask the question that led to really what she had come to say, which was that she was leaving Def Jam at the time. Yeah. So
what did you ask? Do you remember?
It was just like, what's the next single? Or like, are you going to make a video for the next, something like that? And she was like, well, we're not going to spend any, you know, it was basically like, we're not spending any more money on this project because I'm going elsewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, do you think that there's something within you? Like, what is it about you that you're able to ask those questions, or like, you don't know?
I honestly just think I try to listen, and then sometimes it is asking the obvious question, because you always hear like, well, don't ask the obvious question, but no, ask the obvious question, and then also just listen, because most of the time people will say something and it'll lead to like a great next question. I think sometimes we can get so caught up in like, oh, I'm nervous. Like, let me remember, I don't want to be looking at my phone the whole time and what the questions are. Right. So it's like,
sometimes just listen.
Yeah, you gotta, and just be engaged because you don't know where it's gonna lead either. Because like I said, like I'm best friends with Angela Yee. It literally came from me interviewing
that profile,
her.
Right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, if you had any, we talked a little bit about the relationships you've built over the years and like some of the people that have encouraged you to move the way you've been moving, but like, could you speak on any of your mentors within the journalism space or even the digital space?
The funny thing is a lot of my mentors were male. So my first was probably Anselm Samuel, or Anselm Rock as he goes by now. And he's worked like at almost every publication. Like, and he just has like great work ethic, and like he would just tell me like, this isn't good. Like, go back and fix it. But for the most part, he would always be like, everything you write is so great, except for that one, that one story that you. So, like, he would definitely be one. Rondell Conway was another editor of mine at SOHH, and he's like my big brother. And we still have a great relationship to this day. And he definitely has been, trying to think, Ryan Ford, who he's at Cashmere Agency now, and works with Snoop Dogg really closely. But he was at The Source, and he was definitely a mentor early on. At this point, I'm like, who are my mentors?
Have you found yourself in the position to mentor?
I had, at one point I had asked Angela, I was like, I feel like you're my mentor. And she was like, no. She's like, we do the same thing. She's like, we're equal. We're peers. And I was like, okay. Whatever you say.
But you've inspired, and you can work. There are people who you work next to that definitely inspire you to. Oh yeah,
my staff inspires me all the time. Yeah. Like, I give them such a hard time though. I'd be like, they are the biggest pains. It's like having a bunch of children. And they think I'm crazy. Like, they all like see it in their faces, and it's just like. But at the same time, like, I do really like and appreciate them. And if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be able to do it. You know?
I was going to ask, like, what do you enjoy most about what it is that you're doing?
Honestly, is what you just said about like mentoring other people and inspiring other people, because I didn't ever see myself as someone who would inspire other people, even though when I started, especially in terms of doing things for women, I was really doing it because I felt strongly about it and I knew how I felt as a woman. So I don't know why I'm so surprised, but like literally like this weekend, like 3 people came up to me like, you inspire me. And I was like, who, me? Like, what did I do? Yeah, I follow you on Instagram and I'm like, you mean when I'm dropping them thirst traps? You're inspired.
You're silly.
I am. I'm super. It's just my personality. Like, I
love it.
It's just, I try not to take myself.
I don't believe that you're shy. Or I'm sure you've grown out of it being shy.
I am, but it really is like, a lot of it is entertainment. So it's like the camera's on, the tape recorder's on, turn it on, and you have to like turn the personality on. And I think naturally I've still, I think sometimes people have told me before, like, oh, you're not always the friendliest, or like, I didn't know what to say to you or whatever, if I could approach you or whatever. And because it literally would be like, I would go places and I'd be like, nobody knows who I am. Like, do.
Yeah, just keep it moving.
Yeah, like, Homer, like, into the back of the hedges. Like, I'm just going to blend into the bush back here. But, I'm kind of hard to miss. I have big hair, so.
You'll see me around.
See me around.
How would you say that you utilized your network and your platform to influence people? Because I know we talked about Curl Mob.
I don't do it enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we talked about Curl Mob and how this is like a platform you creating to embracing your natural hair. And throughout this entire podcast, you've been talking about how you dealt with things within yourself and like identity, being Black in a predominantly white space, or, just being the woman in a predominantly male space, or whatever that might be. How have you utilized, even with this Curl Mob initiative and like your women's panel, to influence people? You are doing it. We see it. So you got to talk about it.
People had to push me for sure. Like, people were telling me all the time, like, like I think my friend Courtney Lowry, he's at Epic, and he was like, I mean, Bossip, y'all are great. That's great. He was like, but I'm watching you. Like, what are you doing next? Like, what do you have going on? And I think this was before the TV show came out. So I was like, oh, the TV show's coming. And we have a second season coming that I'm not on, but I'm doing so many other things that it really just didn't make sense. I think one thing that we did discover by filming was it was almost impossible to like really do justice to the website with 4 editors on the TV show.
True.
So we have 1 editor on the TV show now. The 2 comedians are still on there. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I'm not under contract anymore, so yeah.
Yeah, you know, TV is a different space, a different beast.
Right. But I'm still doing TV. I've been on The Talk a bunch of times, and I really like new challenges. I'm like not somebody who likes to stay static. So it was like, yeah, I have a really great position at Bossip, but it's like once you start riding that bike, you're like, okay, can I juggle while I do this too?
Right,
so
right.
like I start adding other things. So I really enjoy doing The Talk. That's a live show. So I've been trying to, you know, work on my skills in terms of like being able to like nail it, remember everything I'm supposed to say, being sharp on camera, you know, knowing where to look, knowing how to smile, all those type of things. What other things are going on? I mean, it's a lot.
So much,
it's so much going on. And I'm even with the brand, with Curl Mob, it's a hashtag I've been using like forever just because I love being a curly hair person. And like wherever I go, especially when it's people who don't know me, they're like, the first question is always like, how do you get your hair like that? Or what do you use? What products do you use? That kind of thing. And I just was like, I really want, once I become a personality, for that to be something that I address, because I just want people to be comfortable in, one of my best friends, she has a daughter. When she said, I'm not going to straighten my hair anymore because I want my daughter to love her natural hair. And I was like, that's such a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that I think it's an important thing about me, even though it may seem like a superficial thing.
No,
I think that loving yourself is like such a key part of like your success. And I want people, if me having curly hair or big hair or wild hair or whatever makes someone else feel good about their hair, then that's something that I really will feel good about as well. So that's why I created Curl Mob. And it also came from like, you know, streetwear merch. A lot of it is like super male dominated. I think there was a point in time where like there was a zillion like naked white women on like t-shirts. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, it would be great to have some like women with afros or like slogans for curly hair. And so I'm working towards that, but I'm starting with the pendant necklaces that I have. I have t-shirts and I have
I didn't even
hoodies.
know that's what it said. I was going to ask. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, just to like kind of elevate it, and we're seeing it everywhere. I love what Black Panther did for us.
Amen. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think it's super important that what you're doing for women, for Black women, or for, you know, just
I want to be inclusive because I don't want, like, I feel like there's this whole thing of like white people feeling bad about Black people feeling good about themselves, and I like, it totally makes me like
confused.
Totally confused. I think Solange addressed it really well on her album with the stuff she had from what her mom was saying. It's like Black pride is not like the same thing as white pride. Like white pride is like a white supremacist ideology. Black pride is like nobody likes us, but we damn sure like ourselves.
Right, exactly. Now, I think it's dope what you're doing, and continue to do that, continue to prosper. I wanted to ask you think your parents are happy with your success now?
I know that my mother is, for sure. But I think it took her, she actually moved from Michigan almost 3 years ago, and she lives with me in a house that I bought.
Yeah.
And so I think she's like, okay, now I see, like, I thought you were not being productive or whatever, but this life you've chosen has allowed you to buy a house and have a career, and I think she has a lot more respect for it now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And any last...
I think she'll be happier though if I start writing some books and get a Pulitzer or a Peabody or something.
I'm sure. I mean, but tell her that'll come. You know,
Yeah.
I'm
like, listen,
let me live a little life.
I can't be doing all that hippity hop when I'm in my 50s. Give me something for that time period.
Time period, exactly, for your life. I mean, there's levels to all of it.
Yeah,
for sure. Any last words of advice for the young girl or anyone who's listening that wants to pursue journalism, that wants to become the personality and do some of the things that you're doing?
I would just say really like study your craft, first of all. Like I see a lot of people sometimes when they're pursuing something, they try too hard. If that's like, and I don't want to encourage people not to try too hard, obviously. But sometimes I feel like people go so overboard and like almost become extra. And like the best kinds of writing sometimes is like the simple, simple, seamless way. So I would say perfect doing something like that's really simple. And then you can elevate it. Like, but don't like jump in and think you're going to use TI words. You know,
not TI words.
Yes, the TI thesaurus.
Pull out your TI book. Yeah,
but yeah, I would
make it effort.
I would just say like definitely study the craft. Like read great writers. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like. I would just say just because there's mediocrity all over the place, like don't think just because it's on Instagram and it's a blog on Instagram like that you should do it that way. Like. Do it the right way. Like really study good writers. So I mean, like if we're talking James Baldwin, William Faulkner, like good writers. Writers like that. And then when it comes to this industry, definitely study that as well, because you got to know who's who. And like I think people sometimes are almost disrespectful to the people that paved
the way.
Yeah. And I think you should just know like who different people are, like study what the different jobs are. Everything is not created equal. If you know a whole bunch of people that work at a label, at Atlantic, like an A&R is not the same thing as, a marketing or product manager.
Right.
Just like, if you want to get into this industry, like really learn what all the roles are and think about what your strengths are and play to those strengths. So whether you want to be a writer or, whatever, like that's, I think the best way to go about it is look at other people who are doing what you do and then just really know yourself. So if you know your strength is not in dealing with people, then you don't want to be a publicist because you're going to deal with a lot of people as a publicist.
Many people. Yeah. Well, so what's next for Janeé?
What's next for me? Oh shoot, it's 2:00.
Is it?
Wow. I got to change the window for Boss Up. That's what's next.
Okay.
No, I have working on the next Women in Charge lineup, and it's going to be a bunch of things. So more than just the panel, we'll probably have a dinner. We're working right now to figure out who all's coming. So stay tuned for those announcements. I'm returning to the talk on June 25th, which is the day after the BET Awards. I will be in LA for the BET Awards, so planning for that right now, planning for Essence Music Festival. I'm working on my first book. I don't have a
Mama proud.
Date.
Make Mama proud.
Yeah, make Mama proud. I don't know when that's going to be ready. She might decide it's smut, so we don't want to. We're not going to like. We're not going to say Mama proud. Not yet. It might be premature. I'm also super interested in production now as a result of my TV experience. So I have a documentary that I'm working on, and it's really close to my experience with growing up in Iowa as well. So
I'm excited for it. Well, I know you got to get going. It's hard to be out here doing all these popping things, managing an entire site as well as the many other avenues that you're working on right now. So I'm going to let you go. But before I do that, thank you for coming on our podcast, and tell the people where they can find you via social media, where they can get in touch.
Okay. So my Twitter is at Janeé TMB, which are my last initials, TMB. And my Instagram is at Janeé Bolden, and my Facebook is, I think, /Janeé.Bolden, something like that. It's easy enough to find Janeé Bolden. Yeah. And then I would say, yeah, I check my DMs every now and then. If you have an interest in working, or you're working on something interesting, you can reach out on social media. Don't be a pest.
We know how that can be. So don't be a pest to Janeé, but please make sure you follow her to keep up with all of the things that she has going on. And as always, thank you for joining us here on the IdOMUSIC podcast. You can find us at IDM Podcast on social media, as well as myself at Sammy Approved. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Aw, you're so good. Sonically superior.